So I took a trip up to Minnesota to see the Oakland Raiders play the Minnesota Vikings with my college buddies Dave Beaupre and Al Hansen. This is one of the stops on my bucket list to see the Raiders play in every NFL city. I took a couple extra days and headed down into southern Minnesota and into northern Iowa to retrace some of the footsteps of the early Thons and Thomases. From Minneapolis, my route took me south to Mason City, Iowa. From there, northeast to Osage, Iowa, northwest to St. Ansgar, due west to the Bolin Farm, southwest to the Kensett Cemetery. Completing the loop, I headed north back into southern Minnesota to Albert Lea. Then, of course, back to Minneapolis for the weekend culminating Sunday with the Raiders versus the Vikings. Raiders actually played very poorly and were soundly thumped by the boys in purple. This trip was September 18th through the 23rd in 2019. Just a heads up, some of the videos I was talking while I was filming, so my narration will bounce back and forth from the actual video to this mic that I'm using now. Okay, so I'm coming up on the Memorial Park Cemetery here in Mason City, approaching it from the west. Here we're going to visit 8 of Grandpa Carl's people. So today is Wednesday, September 18th. I'm here in Mason City, Iowa. I flew in today to Minneapolis, hopped in a car and drove down here. I'm here for the Raider-Viking game. So I'm going to go ahead and do a little family visit to some of the grave sites of some of the early Thomases and Thons that settled here in the Midwest. Over my right shoulder here, Ira and Catherine Thomas, my Grandpa Carl's parents. And over my left shoulder here is one of Carl's brothers, Ira Leroy Thomas. So Ira and Catherine are, of course, my great-grandparents, Grandpa Carl's mom and dad. This next picture is a nice shot of them and the family, of course. And I couldn't help but include this picture of Grandpa Ira as it is such a cool period picture. Right next to them is Grandpa Carl's little brother, Ira Leroy. Not Leroy, as I previously stated, but Leroy. And apparently he went by Roy. Now, in the same cemetery and another location is another one of Grandpa Carl's brothers, his brother Harold and his wife Ava. So immediately to their right is son Jerry. Directly behind Jerry is Harold Jr. And directly left of Harold Jr. and directly behind Harold and Ava is Jackie, who of course married this Spurgeon fellow. Now, interestingly, son Jerry died in the Korean War, and apparently he died in one of the very first battles really early in the war. And poor Jerry was not even 18 years old when he died. As I was leaving Mason City, I thought some of these old schoolhouses were very interesting as such classic examples of small town middle America. And as I passed these old commercial buildings, I couldn't help wondering if Grandpa Ira or any of the Thomas boys possibly walked these streets or did business in these old buildings. As I head out on the open road, I was pretty blown away at how colorful and beautiful the farmland was. I was pretty much expecting hot, dusty, and ugly farmland. And as you can see, definitely not the case. And of course, I had to get my selfie in front of this bright yellow bean field. Next stop, Osage, Iowa, which was about 18 miles northeast of Mason City.
So I'm just driving on my way from Mason City to Osage, Iowa, out in the middle of nothing farm country. These yellow plants, those are beans, I guess, and of course that is corn over there. But in the state of Iowa, there is an awful lot of this. So this is Osage, Iowa. So we don't have a ton of history here in Osage. I thought I read somewhere that great-great-grandpa Ever died here. So I thought I would just walk up and down the street a little bit and just try to imagine who might have strolled down these very streets 100 years ago.
So here I am again, looking at these old buildings, wondering if great-great-grandpa Ever strolled down these very streets. Also, notice the Osage National Bank on the corner. Again, did any of our people keep their money in this building right here? Established 1865. Back on the road, next stop is St. Ansgar, Iowa, which is about 10 miles northwest of Osage. St. Ansgar is where great-great-grandpa Ever first settled. Now, I guess he only lived a few blocks away from this church, as well as helped build the church as he did masonry work. As you can see, I included a few close-ups of the brick and mortar, as I couldn't help wondering, but if it was possible I was looking at some of Grandpa Ever's handiwork, possibly.
So I'm inside the church here at St. Ansgar. This is just a little entryway into the church.
So, from some of the things I've read, this church and area were primarily settled by Scandinavian people. As I head over to the First Lutheran Cemetery, which is affiliated with this church, this fact becomes abundantly clear once I started reading the names on the headstones.
So I just pulled into the First Lutheran Cemetery. And I was looking for Culbertson. I just pulled in to have a look around. And right about here, I spotted this big, large headstone up here that says Culbertson. And there was Carrie Culbertson, her husband Frank, and an Irwin Culbertson.
I got really lucky here because I had no idea where Carrie was placed. And as I said, I just pulled in, and as I drove down the lane, I almost immediately spotted the Culbertson Monument. Now, Carrie was the daughter of great-great-grandpa Ever and brother to great-grandfather Isaac, which was Grandma Beulah's dad. So, getting back to my earlier statement about this being a Scandinavian cemetery, check some of the names here: Thorson, Hendrickson, Ageson, and Torgerson. Yep, I was amongst our people here. Now, apparently, great-great-grandpa Ivan Ingeborg had a son, Ole, who died as an infant. I read somewhere that he was the third person buried at this cemetery, I assume way back in the 1800s. I must have walked the grounds for half an hour and I could not find him. I even looked for the most ancient looking headstones, as I figured they were the most likely of candidates. No luck. I eventually found this registry, and as you can see, there is no record of him. So I tried, but I just couldn't find the poor little guy, if he was ever even here. So as I depart the cemetery, heading due west now, I thankfully yet sadly get one more look at Grandpa Ever's church as I leave St. Ansgar. Okay, as I again head out onto the open road, more of this beautiful farm country in the heartland, and 10 short miles due west to the Bolin farm that has been in the family for over 100 years. And this will conclude the first of 3 videos of the trip.